My friend got me started on a new fad diet, but I'm growing concerned about the rash measures advised by the program. Madeline was the one friend in high school who was always on a low-carb, low-fat, low-everything diet. I felt slightly self-conscious as I waited for her to show up at the coffee shop. Over a decade had passed since we'd last seen each other, and I felt very unimpressive in my only clean sweater, which failed to hide my post-pregnancy belly. I glanced at my flat hair in the reflective window glass. It had started thinning ever since I stopped breastfeeding my infant daughter. I tried to fix up the frizzy strands that hung limply at either side of my tired, round face. A part of me wished I hadn't agreed to meet up. The feeling intensified when Madeline walked in. I wishfully assumed the photographs on her social media were edited, but I was wrong about that. My friend's smooth, wrinkle-free skin shimmered with youth. Her large, green eyes still carried the same innocent, carefree expression from high school. Thick, dark curls fell to the small of her back, swaying to the rhythm of her hips as she walked. Madeline had kept her trim teenage physique, yet somehow managed to grow voluptuous in all the right places. Not a single head failed to turn as she passed by. "Hey," I stammered, picking my jaw off the ground as Madeline walked up to me. "Hi, D." She laughed, flashing me her picture-perfect smile. "You look great," she added, the smile turning ever so slightly false. "Ha," I rolled my eyes. "I definitely don't, but having a baby will do that to you." "I get that," Madeline nodded, taking a seat and leafing through the menu. "I'll have a vanilla matcha latte and caramel cheesecake, please," she said to the waiter, a nervous guy who was straining very hard to keep his eyes away from Madeline's chest. "Wow," I couldn't help raising an eyebrow. "I don't think I've ever seen you order dessert before." At this, Madeline threw her head back, releasing the deep, infectious laugh of hers. "Yes, well, I've come a long way from hurling food scales at the wall because they misweighed my daily portion of carrot sticks," she smiled, a sly curl to her lip. "So what's your secret?" I was genuinely curious now. Is there a way I can look half as good and still get away with eating cheesecake? I asked, taking a resentful sip of my unsweetened black coffee. "Well, that's why I wanted to see you, D." Madeline clasped her hands together, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "I've recently gotten into business for myself, and I've been looking to get someone in on the ground floor before it really takes off." I suppressed a groan. Of course, why else do high school friends appear out of the blue? I waited for the pyramid pitch as the waiter brought Madeline her order. I expected her to pick at it, but she gobbled up the giant slice in under a minute. "So sorry, D," she blushed, dabbing a napkin to her lips. "I'm absolutely famished after this morning's rejuvenescence bath." "Rejuva what now?" I asked. "Yes, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself as usual." She shook her head. "If you've kept up with my social media, you know that I've devoted the past couple of years to traveling the world and spiritual healing." I wasn't aware that there was anything spiritual about Madeline finding a rich old man to fly her to the Maldives in a private jet, but I kept my opinions to myself, waiting for her to continue. "I was just so unhappy in my old life, bound by the constraints of my mind, my insecurities. I'm sure you remember what sort of body image issues we faced when we were younger. Things only got worse for me in my 20s. I struggled with body dysmorphia for a very long time," she said quietly, her eyes suddenly naked and sad. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Mads." I placed my hand over hers on the table. The gesture was automatic. Had I thought about it a second longer, I might have remembered that we were no longer a couple of BFFs hanging out at her grandmother's place after school. "Oh, D," Madeline squeezed my hand, smiling. "Don't you worry about me. I've spent a lot of time studying ancient practices. I know all about uniting soul and body, healing from the inside out." She was losing me again. I withdrew my hand and straightened in my seat. My husband had some projects he wanted to get started, and I'd sprung this babysitting gig on him last minute. I didn't have time for obscure archaic philosophies, and I sure as hell wouldn't be giving her any money. I was about to make this very clear, when Madeline raised a manicured hand, her doe eyes pleading me to listen. "Look, D, I know you never liked any of that weird stuff. You're not alone in that, trust me, The average woman does not want to sip potent herbal teas and line up her chakras to lose a couple of pounds. It's a lot easier to slap some fat-burning cream on a patch of cellulite and call it a day. If things get really bad, some might even try joining a gym. She laughed a sardonic, mocking laugh. Yeah, well, most of us have actual responsibilities in this life, I replied, sucking in my stomach. Exactly. Madeline piped up, choosing to ignore my scorned feelings. That's why I want to bridge the gap. I've learned the path to spiritual health, vitality, beauty, and now, I want to let the women of the world in on the secret. For a price, of course, she added, winking at me. So, that green gunk is supposed to help you lose weight? Thomas peered at the tall glass apprehensively. Not directly, no, I replied, feeling defensive. It's part of a program I'm trying out. There's a lot more to it than a smoothie. I avoided meeting my husband's gaze. His eyes were probably large with concern, and I didn't want to explain how my deteriorating looks were making me feel. You know you're perfect in my eyes just the way you are, right? His voice was gentle, the sentiment genuine. You just had Amelia. Maybe you could give your body some time to heal instead of pushing yourself into something like this. A wave of emotion rose in the back of my throat, threatening to spill from my eyes if I didn't suppress it. Taking a deep breath, I smiled at Thomas. It's really not a big deal, dear. It's just a few smoothies and light workouts down the line. Nothing too drastic. I just need a side project, something for myself. My husband looked like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. He held me tighter than usual as he kissed me goodbye before going to work. After he left, I slipped the unmarked paper sachet from my pocket and emptied the contents into the smoothie, mixing them in with a straw. I scrolled through Madeline's Instagram page as I drank the concoction. Amelia was sitting in her feeding chair, making mush out of the banana bits on her plate. She seemed to be enjoying the baby-led weaning activities, though she never actually ate any of the food. I finished the smoothie and started tidying the kitchen. I'd just finished sweeping when Amelia knocked her plate of banana bits onto the floor. An inexplicable wave of anger hit me as I surveyed the splatter on the kitchen tiles. For the first time in her short life, I yelled at my daughter. Amelia cried as I mopped up the mess. It took me some time to cool down. After that, later that evening, I started feeling dizzy as I prepared dinner. That's when I realized I hadn't eaten anything since drinking the smoothie with Madeline's drug mixed in. It seemed impossible, but I just didn't feel any hunger at all. I picked at my plate over dinner that night. My husband must have made some sort of remark about my lack of appetite, but I couldn't really remember what he said. I kept zoning in and out, my mind fixating on images of my new and improved self. After a week of spiked smoothies and almost no other sustenance, I had lost 10 pounds. I struggled to sleep and the days passed in a blur, but for the most part, I felt great, energetic, productive, and I'd stopped shying away from the mirrors in our house. Thomas seemed torn between feeling concerned about me and enjoying the libido boost that came with my growing self-confidence. Madeline had invited me over after checking in with a phone call. She was happy to hear I was doing so well and thought I was ready to begin phase 2 of her diet plan. She explained that the next phase would introduce light exercise into my daily routine, allowing me to maintain a steady weight loss and improve my overall health. After seeing Thomas off to work, I went over to Madeline's. I took Amelia with me since she was still able to knock out pretty much anywhere after a bottle of formula. Madeline led us into a spacious living room, and I placed my dozing baby's car seat on the soft shaggy carpet next to the couch. Wow, Dee, Madeline gushed, I swear you've gone down a size or 2 since last week. Yeah, I beamed. I actually fit into my pre-pregnancy jeans now. Not the skinny ones, but some of the looser cuts. Feels good. That's wonderful, Madeline exclaimed, handing me a cup of tea and sitting down in a wide leather armchair to my right. I held my breath as I took in the interior. The living room was huge, with tall ceilings and beautifully crafted furniture positioned around in a minimalist design. There were 3 narrow floor-to-ceiling windows looking out on a luscious garden. A gardener in uniform sauntered by, trimming the white rose bushes just outside the windows. I shifted uncomfortably on the big puffy couch pillow, We may have been best friends once, but Madeline and I belonged to entirely different worlds now. Phase 1 was all about cleansing the body, flushing out toxins, and shrinking the stomach. The weight loss feels amazing, but it's not sustainable without Phase 2, I'm afraid. Madeline tilted her head, false sympathy flashing in her eyes. Well, I'm all ears, I guess, I said, sipping the tea. I was starting to feel apprehensive about the whole thing. Why was I even there? It looked like Madeline already had everything. What reason could she have for starting a weight loss business? Also, she may have pitched it as a partnership, but so far I'd not been let in on any of the details. I had blindly taken an unknown drug, and that's about it. I felt more like a guinea pig than anything else. Phase 2 is about cleansing the mind, letting go of old attachments and rearranging your values in life. Madeline got up and walked over to a tall antiquarian cabinet. She pulled out a massive black book with yellowed pages and brought it over to the coffee table in front of me. I hesitated. That sounds a little intense for a diet plan, doesn't it, Mads? Seems like something a psychologist might be better suited for, maybe. I was feeling very cold and weak. There was a chill in the room that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't a draft or anything, but the room temperature felt unnaturally low. I gulped down the rest of the tea, hoping it would warm me up. I checked Amelia's nose to make sure she wasn't too cold. She seemed fine, dozing peacefully in the portable car seat. My gaze lingered on my baby's sweet, innocent face, and I suddenly felt incredibly foolish for ever agreeing to do this crash diet. There was nothing wrong with trying to improve myself, but I was going about it the wrong way. I looked back up at Madeline, ready to excuse myself from the whole arrangement when a new, urgent fear gripped my heart. Madeline's light-hearted expression had turned hard, her eyes narrowing as she looked from me to my daughter. I suppose you're about to tell me you're fine staying fat and hideous, aren't you, Dee? She said quietly. What did you just say to me? I sputtered. It's alright, Dee, the sedative will kick in any moment now, she went on, ignoring the shock settling on my face. It took her saying it for me to fully acknowledge the tingling sensation numbing my limbs and clouding my vision. I had felt cold and weak from the first sip, but now the effects of the tea were hitting me hard. I tried to make a move for the car seat, to grab Amelia and run, but I ended up collapsing on the rug instead. The faint sound of Amelia's cries brought me back. My maternal instincts kicked in before my sight had returned, and I lurched toward the faraway sound of my daughter's wails. Something cold and hard collided with my forehead, causing me to stumble back with a yelp. I reached out my hands, cautious this time, feeling the thick metal rods barring my way. I tried to focus my vision, straining to see something, anything of my surroundings. I was no longer in Madeline's living room, that much was certain. The space around me was dark, damp, and cold. The floor beneath my feet felt uneven. A strong chemical smell filled my nostrils, possibly bleach. A light flickered on, revealing that I was trapped in a small cell in the corner of a basement. There was a giant, freestanding bath just beyond the door to my cell. Gothic carvings lined the sides of the tub, and metallic hooks of various sizes hung from the ceiling above. A dark, thick substance dripped steadily from the biggest hook in the middle. The opposite end of the basement resembled a makeshift laboratory. Scales, vials, and flasks lined a counter with the sink. There were shelves upon shelves of scalpels, bandages, and other surgical equipment. Then there were the jars, each dedicated to a specific body part, such as eyes, ears, noses, fingers. I dry heaved, the bile from my empty stomach burning the top of my throat before sliding back down my esophagus. I'd been so busy taking in the dungeon scene, that I hadn't even paid attention to the door at the top of the basement stairs. It swung open, and Madeline briskly descended the steps, holding the car seat awkwardly at a distance as she walked. Amelia was still strapped to the seat, wriggling around and crying hysterically. It has taken a shit, Madeline snarled. The thing smells terrible. There's no way I can perform the ritual until you clean it. Mads, what are you talking about? My voice trembled as I stuck my hands through the bars, trying to reach Amelia, whose car seat Madeline had carelessly dropped to the ground. Don't you fucking call me that anymore, my school friend spat, her eyes tinged with hatred. My name is Madeline, Not Mads. Not that you'll be around to say it anyway. The world will breathe a sigh of relief once your flabby face is no longer in it. I'm sorry, I won't call you that again. I steadied my voice, racking my brains for a way to escape. I'm just a little confused about what's going on here, Madeline. I can't believe I ever thought you would play ball, she huffed, walking over to the sink, pulling a set of surgical scrubs from one of the shelves. Madeline mumbled curses under her breath as she dressed for whatever sinister activity she had planned for me and Amelia. What is this room, Madeline? What are you going to do to us? I said, trying to keep myself together as Amelia's cries pounded away at my eardrums. You were always so fucking stupid, Daisy, so dull, so willing to settle for mediocrity in every aspect of your life. Are you happy now? Are you happy now that you've lived a perfectly boring life? Your death in my basement will be the most extraordinary thing about you? Madeline spoke in low, harsh tones as she arranged several scalpels and a small surgical saw in a tray. I couldn't stand it anymore. I began humming Amelia's favorite song, the one about monkeys jumping on the bed. It wasn't calming her, but it made me feel like I was doing something. It kept me lucid, sane enough to fight whatever horrors awaited us. This is why I was so hesitant to try the ritual with an infant. Madeline muttered more to herself than me as she walked over to my cell door with a set of keys. I mean, the results are going to be incredible, but all I will think about is this fucking smell. I realized Madeline was going to open the cell so that I could change Amelia's diaper. I was ready to pounce the moment she opened the lock, but she hesitated with the key, anticipating my actions. Try anything, and I'll jam these keys down your shit-covered baby's throat, she hissed. I looked past Madeline only for a split second, but it was enough to notice movement in the basement doorway. I could have cried with pure joy and relief when I saw my husband's tall, slender frame gliding down the stairs behind Madeline. Amelia's screams disguised the sound of his footsteps, and Thomas sped up his descent, grabbing Madeline in a stranglehold from the back. Madeline's large, green eyes bulged out from her head as she gulped at the air, clawing at my husband's arm. She didn't struggle for long, her body falling limply to the floor within minutes. Thomas threw me the set of keys as he ran over to our crying baby. He cradled Amelia in one arm, already calling 911 with his free hand. I unlocked the cell door and rushed over to Amelia. She stopped crying when I picked her up, and the three of us ascended the stairs, locking the basement door behind us. I don't want to think about what would have happened if my husband hadn't come home to find us missing at lunchtime. Thomas said he had felt a strong premonition that something was wrong as soon as he entered our empty house. I hadn't told him where we were going to be, and I wasn't answering my phone, so he had to look up my location on the Find My Friends application. I thank my lucky stars every day that he was there to save us in the nick of time. The police found a lot of disturbing things in Madeline's home. That large black book she'd brought out in the living room contained thousands of handwritten pages in Sanskrit, followed by rough translations into modern European languages. Madeline had signed off on a few translations of her own, instructional pages depicting blood-draining techniques and youth rejuvenation rituals. The last page she was working on was dedicated to the benefits of bathing in, as well as the drinking of, infant human blood. Fragments of human bones were discovered in the garden flower beds, but no full skeletal remains. Madeline's medicine cabinet was stocked with hundreds of prescription pills, as well as street-grade amphetamines. The police suspect the contents of my Phase 1 sachets came from there. Madeline's rich boyfriend found a lawyer that got her off on some sort of insanity plea. He was also able to pay the right people to keep the whole story under wraps in the local and national media. As far as I know, Madeline has been locked away in a mental health institution for months now. The worst part is that she still writes to me several times a week. Thomas has taken to hiding these letters away before I see them since the first few had me on the verge of a mental breakdown. They always say the same thing, more or less. Don't you want to be beautiful like me? You can do it. You can have perfection. It's right there, lying helplessly in the crib after your husband goes to bed at night. Set your priorities, rearrange your values. Join me in Phase 2, D.